Most people have never experienced love. They have experienced dependency, emotional rush, the thrill of being wanted, fear of losing someone, and called it love. This may sound harsh, but stay with this for a moment. If you look honestly at your own relationships or the ones around you, you might recognize something uncomfortable. Let's start here. A mother says to her son, "I live for you." She knows when he ate, where he is. She hears the smallest shift in his voice. She puts her own life on hold. Rest can wait. Her interests disappear. Everything revolves around him. But if he doesn't call, she feels anxious. If he pulls away, she feels hurt. If he becomes independent, she feels useless. It's called maternal love, but this is living through another person and fear of being left without them. Psychology would call it emotional fusion, blurred boundaries, lack of separation, sometimes codependency. If a mother loses her sense of self outside the child, if his autonomy feels threatening, that is not love. That is attachment to a role. Another example. A man who rushes at the first call, cancels plans, laughs at jokes that hurt him, pays for everything even when it costs him. He says, "I just love her more than anything." But every time she turns cold, something inside tightens. Every time she disappears, he feels like the ground drops beneath him. He doesn't see that he is being used, because being close matters more than being himself. They call it devotion. Psychology would call it anxious attachment, codependency, self-worth tied to whether he is needed. Again, not love, attachment. Or a couple who say we can't live without each other. They do everything together, think the same thoughts, make every decision as one. It looks like perfect closeness, but if one lives for a few days, the other spirals. If a new interest appears, jealousy follows. If someone asks for space, it feels like betrayal. Outside, it looks romantic. Inside, it is fear of separation, emotional fusion, fear of autonomy, anxiety disguised as intimacy. And one more, a woman who feels too much. She rereads messages 10 times, analyzes pauses, builds stories around tone. If he doesn't reply for an hour, a catastrophe is already playing in her mind. If he is busy, she feels rejected. She says, "I just love very deeply." But this is fear of not being enough, hyperfocus, catastrophizing, anxious attachment, not love. This is how millions of people live. Songs are written about this, movies are made about it, suffering is romanticized, drama is glorified. But suffering is not proof of love, it is proof of attachment. Why do we confuse them? Because love requires inner autonomy. It requires a self that is not collapsing inward, inner integration. And true inner integration is rare. Though the good news is, attachment is not random. Its purpose is not to make us happy in relationships. Its purpose is to show us where we are not yet integrated. So what is the difference? Attachment is always born from lack, a subtle sense that something is missing, that your existence is incomplete, that someone must arrive and fill the gap. Then the other person becomes a function. They must validate you, complete you, stabilize your sense of self. The stronger the inner lack, the louder the bond. It feels intense, dramatic, emotionally overwhelming. But intensity is not love. Many traditions saw this clearly. In Christianity, eros and agape were distinguished. Eros seeks to take, to merge, to fill. Agape is love without demand, a way of being. In Buddhism, attachment and compassion were not the same. Attachment clings, Clinging fears loss. Compassion arises when the mind is not gripping. In Bhakti traditions, love was not dependence on an object, but unity with the source. In Sufism, love was not possession, but dissolution of ego-centered need. Different languages, the same insight. Love does not grow from inner deficiency. If it collapses when the other is absent, if it demands constant reassurance, if it is built on fear of loss, it's not love, it's a form of attachment. Love is quieter. It is not an emotional explosion, it's not drama, it's a way of presence. Love is not what you feel toward someone, it is how you are in reality. When there is no constant tension, no need to hold, no fear of disappearing, then love is not produced, it appears. You can recognize it in your state. When there is no rush, when attention is not fractured, when the mind is not negotiating how things should be. There is just a simple sense, I am here. No tension, no effort. In that presence, the other person stops being a means. They are allowed to be who they are. Dzogchen would call this resting in the nature of mind, not a special state, not something elevated, but the absence of distortion, when the mind is not gripping images, not trying to secure experience, not defending itself from what is. Taoism would call it Wu Wei, effortless action. Where there is no inner resistance, life flows on its own. Care happens without tension. In this state, love is not aimed at someone. It does not choose an object. It is simply there as a quality of presence. Modern neuroscience talks about a regulated nervous system. A mature nervous system can tolerate uncertainty, closeness without fusion, distance without panic. As reactivity decreases, people live less from a sense of lack. There is less chasing for validation, less gripping. The quiet, constant anxiety in the background begins to fade. We stop searching outside for what must be stabilized inside. And from that stability, care becomes natural, not forced, not strategic, not manipulative. Now, very important, attachment is not a mistake. It is not failure. It is not wrong love. It is a stage of maturity. Attachment arises where there is no stable inner ground yet, where a person still seeks stability outside oneself. In that sense, attachment is not opposed to love, it's what comes before it. Through attachment, we discover where it hurts, where we are afraid to be alone, where we lack inner ground. Relationships become mirrors, sometimes painful ones. When someone says, I love you because I can't live without you, it's not love, it's fear. When someone says, you are my whole life, it's not love, that's a loss of self. When relationships are constant jealousy, panic, emotional chaos, that is not depth, it is immaturity surfacing. Relationships are one of the most powerful tools for growing up psychologically. They expose what solitude cannot. Distance can trigger abandonment wounds. Coldness can expose fear of worthlessness. Cleanliness can mirror your own inner emptiness. This is not about someone being bad. Closeness activates what has not been integrated. As long as there is inner division, we search for someone to complete us outside. In depth psychology, Jung described this as the integration of anima and animus, the inner images of the opposite within us. The same symbolism of union appears across religions and mystical traditions. They speak of eternal union, a sacred marriage, a joining. In alchemy, it was called conjunctio oppositorium, the union of opposites. In Indian tradition, it is expressed as Shiva and Shakti, consciousness and energy, presence and movement. In Taoism, it is the harmony of yin and yang. Among the Sumerians and the ancient Greeks, there was the idea of eros gamos, the sacred marriage between gods. Today, in esoteric language, this might be called the union of the divine masculine and the divine feminine. Different symbols, the same movement. The sacred eternal union is not a marriage between two people. It's not something that happens outside. It is the coming together of what was split inside. Masculine and feminine, light and shadow, soul and mind, ego and awareness in one human being. Until that inner integration happens, relationships turn into battlefields. One reaches, the other pulls away. One wants to merge, the other is afraid of disappearing. These are not bad relationships. This is an inner split playing out externally. And this is why attachment matters. Its aim is not to bring happiness. It aims to show where we are not yet integrated. It reveals where there is no inner ground, where stability is fragile, where inner opposites are still in conflict. A relationship makes this visible, sometimes abruptly, sometimes painfully, but honestly. And slowly, by living through these tensions, something begins to integrate. Not fast, not neatly, but deeply. When that inner union truly settles, a quiet shift happens. The other person is no longer the source of your life. It is good to be with them, but without them you still exist. You can lose them and it may hurt, but it doesn't feel like you are disappearing. This is where attachment starts to loosen and love becomes possible. It is important to see that love does not begin in relationship. It begins in how you are present in your own experience. When you no longer live from lack, your life stops orbiting around external supports. You are no longer clinging to possessions, to recognition, to status, to validation as proof that you exist. This does not mean you reject these things. Possessions can be there, money can be there, success can be there, but they are not holding your identity together. That is inner abundance, not having more, needing less. And this precise state shows up in relationship too. You can be with someone without gripping them, without checking, without scanning for reassurance, without trying to secure the bond. If they are there, good. If they are not, you're still here. In love, the other is free, just as you are. It is a very quiet state, no emotional fireworks, no roller coaster, no dependency on reaction. There is clarity, warmth, attention, and because there is no drama, it is often mistaken for coldness. This is why love can look boring next to the intensity of attachment, but only here is real intimacy possible, without engulfment, without self-erasure, without losing yourself. The simplest sign of love is the absence of inner tension. If you can be simple around someone, not performing, not persuading, not holding them in place, that is maturity. Pain may still exist, but your inner integration remains intact. In Sufi language, love is the disappearance of the ego-centered stance, not self-destruction, the end of living from deficiency. When there is no one loving for a reason, what remains is love itself. And this is why love vanishes when you chase it. Searching for love is outward movement, trying to extract from another what feels missing inside. But love cannot be obtained, or earned, or negotiated. It appears when the search stops. Love is not a goal, not a reward, not a final level to unlock. It is a consequence of ending the inner war, a consequence of integration, a consequence of maturity. Love is not an emotion that ignites and fades. It is steady presence. It is how consciousness rests in reality when it is mature enough and integrated enough that it no longer needs to hold, prove, or control in order to feel whole. Love may experience grief, but it does not live in chronic strain. It does not require self-sacrifice for survival. It does not demand self-abandonment. It does not require constant proof. It gives from fullness. Love does not need protection, or justification, or drama. It appears where there is no longer a war within. And then it becomes clear. Love is not something that happens between people. It is life at rest within itself when nothing feels missing.